Um, yeah, it's recording now. Can you guys see the
Yeah,
thing? Okay.
I don't see it yet, but I think if you guys can see it, I'm pretty sure that's working.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
I can see it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, cool. So I'll just start off with the introductions for anyone who will be listening to this, and then Noor can take over the conversation from there. My name is Kumel. I am the president of Hum Aahang this year. Alongside me is Noor, who is the general secretary of Hum Aahang, and our guest for our first podcast is Hafsa Khawaja. It's a bit difficult to uh, make her introduction because again she's a very good friend and I've never formally done this, so let's see how it goes. But in a nutshell, she graduated from LUMS in 2018, majored in political science, minored in history. During her time at LUMS, she was involved in different student initiatives, one of which, of course, was the society Hum Aahang, and she co-founded it with a few of her other friends. After she graduated, she went to Columbia and is right now a Fulbright scholar who is pursuing her master's in South Asian studies. Um, and I think we leave the rest for the conversation. So I'll hand this over to Noor now.
All right. So, I think one of the first things we wanted to ask you, and that I'm really curious to ask you, is how did Hamahang really come into being, and were there other people involved in its formation, and how did you really pin down what it would stand for? So, religious harmony, tolerance, and peace building are pretty specific goals and uh, words to use when defining a society. So, I was just wondering if you could start off with that.
Sure. So there were definitely more people involved. When I came to LUMS in 2014, there were a bunch of people who were already organizing around these principles. And these people were Minahil Mehdi, Faizan Qayyum, Muhammad Ali Ilahi, Dabar Numan. And I was fortunate enough to get in touch with them because I was interested in these initiatives too. And from there on, I was closely associated with them, with the organization of events they were doing. By that time, Hamahang wasn't a society. It was just a collection and a collective of individuals who were organizing various events on campus and beyond it. So by the time that they graduated, which was around 2016 and 2017, they decided that I should lead the initiative in LUMS. And for quite a while, I tried that. And we were initially under the Social Innovation Lab. And then we tried to do different events without, being a formal organization. But I increasingly realized that it was a huge obstacle for us to do anything on campus. Because as anyone at LUMS would know, things are often very bureaucratic. And there's a lot to go through to just get like the simplest of things approved. So it was a very, I mean, there were a lot of fears associated with making Hamahang a formal body, but I mean, after a lot of thought and care which went into it, I decided with the rest of the people that Minahil and others had designated as people who would lead Hamahang after them, such as Afnan Qayyum and others, that we should institutionalize Hamahang as a society because we felt like this would really give it the status and recognition which would allow it to go through easily with the initiatives it had in mind. So we decided to make Hamahang a society in 2017. And for that, obviously, we had to formulate a proper constitution. There were long drawn out discussions about what it should be, how it should be worded, what should be the structure. So basically, starting from scratch in terms of institutionalizing it. Because we also didn't want for it to be just diluted or watered down just because it was being institutionalized. That process kind of culminated in August 2017. And from then onwards, we introduced Hamahang as a society. And we were pretty clear on the principles from the get go, to be honest, because these were the very principles around which the people before us had organized to, and the principles we felt were pretty pervasive in our initiatives, which were, for example, the community engagement project at Johannabad, vigils, protests, open mics, a lot of these things. So we were clear on the principles, but the decision to institutionalize was definitely necessitated by the hurdles we were facing at LUMS in terms of getting our events approved, going about them, publicizing them. So we thought like this was the best route among the options we had in order for there to be proper student engagement with the idea of Hum Aahang.
Okay, that's thank you for that. That sounds like a lot of work, but also a great kind of story to know because I don't think a lot of people know the real origins of Hum Aahang. So thank you for that. Right. So the next question would be, what was your time at LUMS generally like? And now that you're kind of outside of it, in graduate school, what does it look like from the outside, especially in terms of student politics?
So I would say my time at LUMS overall was, I mean, quite wonderful, to be honest. And I realize that while I say this, this is not something that's applicable perhaps to many people. And, it's a unique experience, it's mine, and it may not be replicable across students. I was just very fortunate to have found a couple of instructors and professors who I looked up to, who taught me a lot within and beyond the classroom. And I think in terms of student politics, however, my own personal experience of the university aside, I think there were a lot of difficulties when it came to student politics at LUMS. When I was a freshman in 2015, there was a talk scheduled. It was supposed to be held, I think, in March or April. And a lot of us were looking really forward to it, but we were just informed in one of our classes by the professor that the talk had been cancelled. And when we inquired why it had been cancelled, we were told that it was just cancelled. And I mean, we all knew why it was cancelled. But it was only later that the details emerged when we got to know that the HSS department, the people who were organizing, were approached obviously by people from the outside who did not look favorably upon such a talk being held at LUMS. It was after that that a lot of people at LUMS decided to make a group and get together and decide how they should be protesting such a violation of academic freedom and such a breach of an academic institution's right to decide things and to converse upon things. So through the course of that, that's when I met people who were heading Hum Aahang and who had conceived of Hum Aahang in the first place. And so there were protests on campus after that. I wrote a blog on the issue for Dawn, and there were various kinds of social media campaigns, collaborations with instructors, discussions with the vice chancellor. But after that, I mean, after the end of that, which was to register our protest and to try to get that talk reinstated, the talk couldn't be reinstated, of course. Um, I mean, this batch, which seemed a bit active to me, at least graduated in 2016 and 15. Um, After that, I mean, during my time, there were several issues within LUMS, institutionally and in many other aspects. But it was very difficult to, I think one of the main issues that at least I witnessed was that there is definitely a lack of vast student support for initiatives that revolve around organizing. And I mean, there was one particular incident in 2017 when a string of incidents had occurred at LUMS and, which warranted some sort of investigative committee. So one could survey what was going wrong with the institution, how could it do better by its students. And after that, I mean, initially there was a lot of momentum. But at the end of the day, when we really needed the momentum to materialize into pushing for concrete reforms within the institution, that momentum fizzled out. So not only was there also like resistance to this organizing and asking the administration to reflect, to investigate, to interrogate its practices, its policies, but there was also a complete, I think, dispersal of momentum once things started going, in the serious, non-exciting ways, which was that we now had to work for the implementation of the reforms, which, by the way, the reforms were identified by the investigative committee, which had been formed by LUMS itself. Um, so I think that was, for me, that kind of really encapsulated the issues with organizing at LUMS. There is resistance, there is a lack of momentum, and it's difficult to follow through because the administration and the management committee themselves are very resistant to changes. They're very, very resistant, and they try their best to, dig their heels in and not respond to any requests for actually interrogating their long established and long entrenched practices, which are clearly sometimes injurious to students' well being, their mental health, and even their academic progress. So, I think that is when I realized that organizing at LUMS, while to the outsider it may look like, oh, LUMS is a very liberal institution, their kids protest all the time. That is really not the case often. There has always, I feel like, been a bunch and collective of students in every batch who have organized around the issues of their day, both within the institution and beyond. But at the end of the day, you really need to bear in mind that's just one collective, and they do face a lot of opposition, they do face a lot of resistance. I mean, it's easier for a lot of professors and the rest of the student body to obviously pontificate and say that this shouldn't be done, this should be done, we should protest this way. But it takes a lot of effort to organize within an institution like LUMS, because if at the end of the day, it is a bubble. And I think one of the reasons that Hum Aahang, I felt the need to to institutionalize Hum Aahang was important, was that, when you're in a bubble, you do feel a disconnect to the issues. And I feel like just because you are in a bubble, that does not mean that you do not engage with what is happening around you, even if it doesn't affect you, and what is happening beyond this bubble, which is in the rest of the society. But having, like, leaving my own experience of that entire thing behind, which I would say was quite disheartening on some ends. Coming to Colombia has been an altogether different experience. One of the things that I immediately noticed here was that there is really no such community here that one can access or go to in terms of organizing. I mean, sure, I mean, it's a huge student body of thousands and thousands of students, but despite that, I mean, there is no community as such, even when it comes to like a collective of students, just like 2 dozen or such, who would be organizing around issues. I read,
Um,
huh,
हाँ, like, और इसके बीच में just sorry to interrupt, but you can also, like, मुझे याद है कि I think शुरू में you also mentioned this, I think this story where you went to one of your co-curricular heads or someone, and you wanted to organize something. Maybe it was Saeed's birthday or what, or something along those lines, and you were like quite blatantly told that it's like a white conservative university which doesn't really have a lot of politics. Um, so if you could also elaborate on that experience.
I mean, so I think it was the incident where my flatmates went to one of their professors and they asked him that, why is there such an absence of politics on the campus? And he responded to them that, this is the place from which Edward Said went about to write Orientalism. So you can imagine the state of politics in Colombia. And even within societies over here, which they are not particularly geared towards a politics of sort or even organizing. And that's something which I've kind of seen across the board. Um, so there's no community to access in terms of organizing, and I mean, even to share like a vision of sorts. I mean, sure, there might be, for example, reading groups, study circles, etc., but they are not the vehicle for like pushing for organizing or campus politics, so on and so forth. And I recognize that 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 may sound very amusing, because at the end of the day, Columbia is an elite, gate kept institution. It is old white elite, and to expect politics in such a place is, maybe it's a folly of sorts, but I mean, you do have an expectation at the end of the day, given the unique moment, the unique historical and political moment we inhabit, and especially in America itself. So there is no community, I feel like, at Columbia of that sort. There is definitely an absence of politics, both within students and I think even among professors.
Hmm. Um, and like one of your inspirations when it comes to organizing student politics naturally, and maybe that's why a lot of us in fact share this same feeling, feel like this urge to organize comes from Iqbal Ahmad.
Hmm.
And like I'd also love if you talk a bit about him. I mean, मुझे पता है कि 2019 में you were working for the Gurmani Center, and you also helped organize this conference on Iqbal. So if you could just tell us and everyone who will be listening to this how you know like stumbled upon Iqbal, and in fact, I mean, we've shared those moments during the conference as well where we've discussed things, but it would be interesting to know what that conference also meant for you personally, and whether or not it helped shape uh, you, especially when you came here at Columbia and saw that nothing uh, extraordinary was happening.
Hmm. So I stumbled upon Iqbal Ahmed's mention when I was, I think, 15 or 16. I was, I have a blog, so I was trying to write this post. I had read Christopher Hitchens' piece in which he called Pakistan a land barren of achievements. I still remember the phrase. And I remember that as a 15, 16-year-old, that really struck me, and I was very offended by it. I was very outraged by it. And this was, I think, right at the peak of when Pakistan was touted as the world's most dangerous nation. So a lot of us were very annoyed by the sort of characterization that was done of Pakistan during those days. It was an attempt to rebut Hitchens' assertion about Pakistan as a land barren of achievements that I decided to write a blog post which detailed the achievements of Pakistani people, the diversity of communities here, the diversity of traditions here, different world records, stuff of that sort. And I was looking to research into the different thinkers or different, great people that Pakistan had produced. And I stumbled upon a mention of Iqbal Ahmed, which said that, he was widely consulted by revolutionaries, journalists, students, organizers from across the world. And I remember being very struck by that who was this person that I hadn't known of? Who was this person who was loved and praised by the likes of Edward Said? Um, and I was like, why did I not know of him? And who is this person? So I started looking more into Iqbal's life. And at that time, there weren't a lot of resources available on his works. He, and as you would know, he didn't write any books himself. And he wrote a lot of articles for Dawn and for other publications, but a lot of them were not readily available on the internet at that point. So I kept digging, I kept reading through the things I did come across. And that's when I really got into reading through his thought, his work, his life, and they left a deep imprint and impact on me. Not only because of his stature, because of his academic and intellectual caliber, but also because of the fact that his life was a life of practicing what he studied and what he taught. And which for me is a scholar practitioner ethic, to be a scholar and to be a practitioner at the end of the day. So, I think there is so much from Iqbal that one can gain and learn from his life, from his work. He had prophetic insight into the events of the day, which continues to resonate. But I think one of the things that has stood out in glaring contrast to me, especially now I am at Columbia, is the absolute lack of this scholar practitioner ethic in professors here. I feel like it's a very artificial binary that has been created by the academy itself and maybe by liberal academy, that you can either be a scholar or you can be a practitioner or an activist. Um, I mean, at the end of the day, when you're in the academy, which is a deeply hierarchical institution, which has a politics of its own, and which is very gate kept, and in which knowledge is produced, which at the end of the day is not an apolitical endeavor. It's not an apolitical process that just occurs in a vacuum. When you are engaged in these processes, how can you claim to be non-political? You do have a politics, even if you're just geared towards securing tenure for yourself or securing promotions for yourself. That is still a politics. And by a politics, I feel like a lot of people seem to conflate it with saying, oh, I support XYZ party, oh, I support this candidate. A politics basically means your worldview of the world. What is your worldview of the world? What is your imagination of the world? What or who is your scholarship serving, what narrative is advancing, and what does it seek to do at the end of the day. That is what a politics and an ethic is. um, so I felt like there was a huge lack of that in Colombia. And I think it just feels more striking when you are studying South Asia at Columbia, because I mean, I studied South Asia at LUMS, and I just felt like one of the things which really stood out for me was that the things I studied in class were the things I could relate to the environment beyond the class. The way that they were taught, the way that those things were taught to me, was in such a manner that I could relate to what was happening around me in my immediate environment. So there was an urgency to the text that I was reading. There was an urgency to what I was being taught. And there was a resonance to it. Like, these are not mere words. These are not things that are decontextualized, but these are things equally relevant and valid today that I could, involve in my life and I could practice. But when it comes to like Colombia, I just feel like even when you're studying South Asian history, it just feels like it's in a vacuum, and you're studying South Asia almost like it's a relic. That, oh, this is the history, as if South Asian history has not been weaponized and is not being weaponized right now. As if South Asian history does not have a huge role in the politics of South Asia right now, and in the marginalization of many of its communities. So I just felt like that, there was this huge lack among professors here. At least so far, I've just had 2 semesters here. When it comes to organizing, when it comes to taking political positions, when it comes to even just relating what they're teaching to actual events happening in South Asia right now. Um, it almost feels static in a way. So that was one of the things that I was a bit disappointed by, although I would say I wasn't really surprised. But yeah, that is, I think, one of the things that I keep going back to Iqbal Ahmad, when I notice these things, and when I bear these in mind, that he was someone who made it possible to both be a scholar and be an activist and an organizer. At the end of the day, I feel like he it just wasn't even a binary for him. It wasn't even a choice. If you were a scholar, you were also a practitioner of it. It wasn't that difficult. This is someone who took, very courageous stances on the question of Palestine, stances on the question of Kashmir, and decolonization. This is someone who was so ostracized and alienated that he would have lunch alone at Cornell. His faculty members would not sit with him. He would sit alone. He was threatened with deportation at one point by the US, but he didn't back down. So it just makes me feel like if he could do that at that time, why is it so difficult for the contemporary scholars and academics and intellectuals of today to espouse these positions? And I think ever since I started looking up to Iqbal Ahmad, one of the things I did want to do was to, commemorate his memory and to honor him, because I felt across the years when I was reading him that he wasn't well known enough and that he wasn't read enough, despite the fact that he was absolutely brilliant. So I had been trying when I was at LUMS to get something organized, to honor him. And by chance and by luck, it was that Dr. Kamran Astar Ali became the Dean of HSS in my senior year. And I approached him while not knowing that he was actually Iqbal Ahmad's nephew. And I approached him with the idea that we should do something on Iqbal Ahmad. And this started in 2017. Like, the discussion started in 2017. And then, Kumail, you would know that you joined in 2017 too, in these discussions. And then all three of us obviously became involved in trying to organize something on Iqbal. I mean, we would have frequent meetings, there would be lots of discussions, but the purpose at the end of the day was quite clear, which was to honor his memory, to commemorate his life, and to make sure that people read him and know how valid and relevant it is even for today. So it was the culmination of those efforts that we organized the Iqbal Ahmed conference in May 2019, in May, or I think the 3rd of May. So for me, that conference is very special. It is the realization of something, of an aspiration I had for a very, very long time. And I feel like it was quite successful. The discussions that were had during the conference, the people that were involved, the response after, I feel like all of these things are very, very significant. And it also did make me realize, because Kumail, you would know this just as well as I do, that they were essentially just three people involved in organizing it. It was you, me, and Kamran Saab. And I think that made both of us realize that at the end of the day, it's not that difficult to push for such efforts or to conduct such things or to organize such things. You just need a collection, a bunch of committed individuals who can push through with determination if they want to get something established. And so, in that case, I think it was a very heartening endeavor on our part. And it really made me realize that if you set yourself to it, you can do certain things. Because I mean, the conference too was, it was not without issues, and it was an entire conference. I was in collaboration with FC College, so there was a lot that came in the way. But I think there are certain conversations, there are certain discussions, certain people who should be honored. And I think while the task may seem huge or impossible, but it may seem difficult to, like holding a conference, organizing something, organizing on campus, what is difficult does not mean it's impossible. And if you have to push through certain things if they're worth it, and if you have to push through things which will go against the tide at the end of the day, so they're not going to be easy in any way, but they are definitely things that are necessary.
All right. I had a question regarding the scholar practitioner binary that you talked about, how instructors are either scholars or activists and have to choose between those two. So I was just wondering, do you think the relationship between a teacher and a student has to be rethought or reimagined for this kind of for instructors and teachers to kind of come out and actively participate in causes that matter to students and that should matter to them as well? If you could kind of briefly comment on that.
Absolutely. I think that it is an abdication of responsibility on any scholar or professor's part if they refuse to engage with the environment that they're in. And when you engage with the environment that you're in, you have to take into account the matters and the issues that, are significant in that and which are troublesome in that. And simply to teach a text is, I feel like, something that, well, maybe not all, but a lot of people can do. To teach is to teach it eloquently or articulately is also something that a lot of people could do. But what exactly is the relevance of what you're teaching? Why are you teaching at the end of the day? Is it simply a sort of an exercise in leisure reading, or is it something else? I mean, there has to be a purpose of sorts to what you're doing, and I think that purpose is engagement with, the moment you're in, the society you're in, and the issues of the day. Because if it has to be related to what is going outside, it can't just be like you go to the classroom, you read text, you read about these lofty grand theories, you come out, and that's it. The moment you step out, that's it, that finishes it. So I feel like there definitely needs to be a reimagination of the relationship between students and professors. And because I mean, radicalism mere textually is nothing. It has to be practiced. If you're teaching something, it has to be practiced. If even if you're not practicing it, I think its practice should be encouraged by the professors. And while I recognize that in Pakistan there are various issues that a lot of professors also face when it comes to organizing with students, taking political stances against the administration. Um, because I mean, there are issues of financial stability, there are issues of academic freedom, there are other issues. But I do feel like one isn't saying that you should simply go out and just stand with them and protest and everything. That is just one way of expressing your support for what they're doing. There are various other ways to express your support, to help your students, to guide them, and to listen to them. I think one of the most important things is in this reimagination, which I think is, it's long due, is that it's not just teaching, it's also listening to your students. I mean, it has to be a mutual two-way process. You listen to them. If you've taught them something, what is it that they've made it out to be? And how are they practicing it, or how are they relating it to the outside world? And even if they're not relating everything to the text or theory you've studied, um, that doesn't mean that they can't have ideas worth practicing, or they don't know, they're not in touch with the realities around them. So I feel like a lot of professors tend to, they shy away from these things because they feel like their responsibility is simply to teach, and that's it. But I mean, that's just partial. You are teaching, but to what end? So I completely agree with you. There has to be a reimagination of the relationship between students and professors, I think, especially in Pakistan.
Yeah, and like ACG Skipper, like when you speak of, even South Asian studies being taught at Columbia, you feel like that it's completely torn from its context. And when you talk of it, it almost seems as if it's like a frozen in time,
Hmm.
immobile,
Hmm.
um, put on display, a relic of the past. Um, and like even I think in our conversations, and uh, I think all of us in this conversation have experienced at some point in time this feeling that whatever we're reading is cannot or does not resonate with the reality of a certain instructor or the reality of our immediate environment, which almost feels like it's a dead end, right? You're reading texts uh, which no one is bringing to life once again through practicing them, and students sort of become, I think, Paulo Freire, like said, become repositories of information rather than an avenue of dialogue, and
Hmm.
that definitely does remain. That is definitely an issue which uh, I think we all at some level as students and even as professors, I would imagine, have to contend with.
No, that's definitely true. I feel like if your texts don't have engagement with the outside realities, even if they are realities on campus or even if the realities in the society you inhabit or the country you inhabit, then they're dead texts. And I think it is, even if professors feel like they can't fully participate in the engagement with the realities outside the classroom or support the students in these measures and initiatives, they can at least instill a sense of responsibility in their students, that the texts you're reading right now, you're reading them for a reason, and that reason should be elaborated upon because of its relevance, and also that you're reading this with a responsibility, not to not just remember these things and, I don't know, post them on social media and just show, that you've read these texts, but you have a responsibility towards them, towards these texts, towards what you've learned. And that is to, because if you're learning, but you're not practicing or you're not espousing it, then why are you learning? What is the point? If it is not to imagine a better moment, a better world that you're living in, and to be better and to do better. If you can't do that, then what is the point of learning?
Right. Thank you for that. So another question I had was regarding social media. And these days, since we're living in a time of social distancing especially, a lot of activism is being facilitated by social media. So how do you see this platform today? And for example, I personally feel that certain words have lost their meanings because they're overused so much online now. For example, performative or woke, or even things like cultural appropriation. I think sometimes these words get twisted in conversations that happen online. So, do you think that there's an overuse of these certain terms? And just generally, how do you see activism on an online platform today?
I would definitely acknowledge that there is a central significance that social media has assumed in recent years when it comes to getting people together, having difficult conversations, organizing. But at the end of the day, it's just one area in an entire, in the entire preparation one does for these things. Um, I mean, at one point, sure, we do have difficult and controversial conversations on social media, but I feel like the quality of those conversations has really gone down in recent years. And you're absolutely right. You're spot on about, the overusage of words and them absolutely losing their meaning. Um, as anyone who's on Twitter would see, it's a deeply polarized space. Maybe the site is geared that way. Maybe it's shaped out to be in a way in which it's not conducive to constructive dialogue anymore. But I do feel like increasingly, given the nature of conversations on Twitter, that while it is an important channel to express your opinions, to express your arguments in debates, and to get in touch with like minded people or even people who don't agree with you, I don't think it should just be the end. Like, it is social media as means to an end as opposed to being the end itself. So, um, I feel like a lot of people tend to lose sight of the fact that if you are doing something on social media, that just shouldn't be the end of it. There is something beyond it. And there are things that need to be done beyond social media and on the real ground. So I mean, that is important. For example, a couple of weeks ago, not even a couple of weeks ago, I think 2 weeks ago, America was convulsing with the protests in the wake of George Floyd's murder. And social media was definitely a very important tool in that it was being used to show police brutality. It was being used to, rebut misinformation, disinformation. And but at the end of the day, you see that even in the middle of a pandemic, the conversations weren't limited to social media. There were hordes of people out on the streets, who camped out, who were out there, who were protesting, who were, documenting all that was going on, engaging with people, organizing, and helping the communities who were protesting, who were out, forming linkages, forming coalitions. So, I mean, the conversation just doesn't end at social media, even if it begins there. And I think it's important to take these conversations and take these words and other things beyond social media into the realm of real ideas and real work.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
thank
think,
you.
yeah. Sorry,
Mhm.
go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, I think we're coming to the end of our discussion, and I think that's like a good note to sort of conclude it on, because I think that's what this conversation has also been about. Um, and so, like from my side, it's just I just want to thank you for uh, you know uh, taking the call and having this conversation with us and to whomever would be listening to it, because I think it's sometimes, even if there's probably a lot of new things here for a lot of new people, but even if there isn't, I feel like that its reiteration sort of validates oneself in taking a stand and then uh, staying there despite whatever fears and insecurities we face collectively as well as personally. Um, so thank you for that. Noor, if you have anything to add, please feel free to.
I also just want to say thank you. I think this was a lovely conversation, and a lot of questions that I also was kind of confused about and curious about were answered. And um, yeah, thank you for having this conversation and taking out the time to do that, uh, because a lot of young people do want to help out and do want to kind of be participants for certain causes, but they just simply may not know how, and they may not know how to understand certain ideas and go forward with them. So hopefully this gives them some clarity. So thank you.
Thank you both for having me, and this was great. And best of luck to both of you for heading Hum Aahang in the coming year.